So I am trying to correct the proportions, and one of the things I'm finding in the sculpture is that I have the legs too short, the torso too long. So one of the things I need to do is that also another big problem. So because of the cardboard box, these things always happen. It's sinking here. So the body, of course, is sinking along with it. So you have to keep that in mind when you're sculpting, because otherwise we are going to be dropping. But as this clay hardens, it's going to firm up, and then you can add more and level it out. But I am losing a bit. I mean, if I'm looking at it, this is the base of the cardboard. I don't really have a lot. So it was a bad idea. I think the thing I should have done was seal the cardboard with some plastic so the cardboard wouldn't get so soggy. But my idea was that it'll just burn. And I've done this before. But it didn't sink so much because it didn't weigh in, I guess, on the weight of the clay. This is 25 pounds. This is over 25 pounds already. It's a heavy beast to open. So I am struggling with the proportions. As you look around, it might look like it's an okay proportion, but everything kind of bothers me about it. Also, I wanted to make the figure be accurate with the proportion of the scale of the of the base. So I might have to actually move this back and kind of stretch it out and make it even bigger. So that's kind of like the struggle that I have right now, is working on the proportions. And it's very difficult to get the proportions right, but you should try to get as close as possible because it'll just keep getting worse. So if your proportions are really bad, they'll just keep growing. Like it's going to look like an alien at the end of this, and that's not what you want. You want to stick to your original plan, and I'm going to try to keep to my original plan as best as I can. The proportion is not there, the gesture is not there, but now you're starting to get a feel of the sculpture itself. You can see the way the hips are. They're almost level vertically, but slightly a little bit further this way. And then, of course, the shoulders are almost flat because she is positioning her elbows on the actual pad. But I think I am going to make it a little bit bigger. The bad thing about this particular one is that it's heavy, that it's big. But one of the things I like to do is if you keep things flat like this with this tool, this way you're not limited to creating a lot of detail. This one's good too, because if you need to round something here, you can just take this and just kind of curve it. This is a technique that I learned at the Torpedo Factory in Alexandria. There's a really good sculptor there, and he was always doing that, and I was like watching him. And this is a good technique for just like rounding things off, because you don't want to always get into the habit of scraping. So one of the things you might want to consider getting are sculpture calipers. They kind of look like this. They come in different materials. These are aluminum, they're lightweight, they're cheap. And one of the things you want to keep doing is taking measurements, like relative measurements, say from like bony landmarks. One of the measurements I took, and I know that I'm off by a long shot, because that's usually what happens, is you find the middle of the figure. Let's say that that stick represents the middle. If I put it here and say I measure it to my hands, to the tip of my hands right there, this should be the middle. So you can see I have quite a bit to go here. But that's okay, because her foot will be dangling, and she has her tippy toes all the way back, so I'm not too far off. So the measurement that I took right here would be the middle. That means that this thigh is going to be raised up. So I have my clay here, and this is why you can't start doing details in the beginning. You have to just work on proportions first and take plenty of measuring. of your model if you can, using a caliper. Since I'm using photos, it's a little bit harder because you don't have the benefit of having the model right next to you. Push your clay down quite a bit. You can see the surface is changing a little bit because I'm using the backside. But if I do it like this, you can see I can remove a lot of that perfect surface. And I'm just going to build up the legs a little bit along with the belly. And we can always take our tool like this, even using the backside, and just kind of twisting. Just take your tool in a twisting motion, just do it like this. That way you can kind of get in the positions that your fingers would have. Usually like at the very bottom of like, what do you call the pubis, is that middle. And from the back it would be a different position, but it would be right about here. And then you can just take it using calipers and measure it. I'm measuring to the very tip of the hand as well, and the toe. It's okay if you're a little bit off, but it's always better to work on your proportions before you start doing details. One of the things I like to do using one of these tools is to figure out the shapes by drawing on my model just some of the landmarks. So here we have the sacral triangle, because it's getting squished right here and it's getting pushed up. Once it gets to here, it requires a little bit more padding. You know, the leg comes down just a little bit more and then it straightens out. The feet is also going to be dangling out here, which is exactly what I want. And with this one, something is happening here because this has sunk in, so we need to make sure that we level this out. And as we go up, this is a very difficult pose. So every time like you want to do like a reclining pose, it's easier with clay because the clay doesn't move as much as if you're doing a standing pose. But now, figure out the middle of your back and kind of figure out that, okay, she's twisting, so this is kind of coming down and cutting across there. So that spine is actually going to be a dip, and especially here because we have the erector spinae muscles on the sides, and it helps to draw with the clay, just add like little bits once you have established a little bit more. But keep going with your tool and try to draw lines the way you would see it. So here is one of the flank pads. That is the, the love handles you would have here. The external obliques. The scapula is going to be a very important landmark because she has a lot of weight on that elbow and the shoulders are moving up. So we're actually going to be adding quite a bit here. And you can add like just a rough estimate of where the scapula is going to be, but everything is going to be changing. I make so many changes with these sculptures. At this point, there's this, and the breast is actually kind of coming in. So this is why I like these wooden tools. And you should get like wooden tools for this because the wood, well, it's cheap. And also, it feels good on your hand. When you're using metal tools, they don't feel as good. These are just cheap Plaza Art ones made in China. And you can make your own too. So kind of push it in, pushing this left breast in, and then at this point we have the rib cage. You have to kind of like try and look a little bit inside. So the rib cage is going to be an oval, like an almost like egg shape, but in sculpture you don't draw it in, but I'm just trying to draw where it is just to kind of help me. Also I'm seeing that this actually kind of needs to be coming up a little bit. So you can use a bigger tool like this and kind of just push it up. If you round it off like this, you can move little bits of clay at a time. And just by tapping it like this, it pushes down the clay without making a lot of geometric changes. So we're going to keep going with this. If I turn it, you'll see how unfinished it really is. This is a very difficult part to sculpt. Not that it's like difficult per se, is that it's down here and I have it very thin. It's as if I actually have to build out this quite a bit. There needs quite a bit of clay here, but it's very difficult to get your hand in there. If I turn it this way, you'll start to see some of the shape. I think probably my favorite is just from this vantage point. It looks kind of neat. But as the clay sinks in, you'll have to remove some of these things that are kind of coming down just a little bit. And just by using a very large scraping tool or whatever tool that you have, you can make very large movements without spending a lot of time. And that's what you want to do. You want to work fast just to get that gesture. Cool thing about these tools, you can put your clay kind of like on it if it sticks, because mine is still dry, and you can apply it with a tool instead of using your fingers.